GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. I'm Tom Harwood, Deputy Political Editor of GB News, bringing you State of the Nation's 2024 election coverage. Tonight, national service or irrational disservice? Rishi Sunak raised a few eyebrows this week when he announced that a Conservative government would bring back a form of mandatory national service. But with the Home Secretary saying there'll be no criminal penalties for sidestepping the so-called compulsory scheme, is the plan workable, or is it an ideological gimmick thought up by Theresa May-era policy wonks? And Nigel Farage has faced utmost opprobrium for the crime of saying to Trevor Phillips exactly what Trevor Phillips himself said about British Muslims just a few years ago. We ask tonight, why the uproar? And today marked Sir Keir Starmer's first election campaign speech, the moment just about no one has been waiting for. The opportunity to preside substance over style came and went as His Majesty's Leader of the Opposition and Knight of the Realm attempted to invoke working-class roots. Plus, the Prince of Harry's courtroom drama continues as the Biden administration pleads with the court to keep the Duke of California's visa application under wraps. All that to come. State of the Nation starts now. And through it all, I'll be joined by my panel, the former Labour MP and former Royal Navy seaman Stephen Pound, and the former Brexit Party MEP turned Conservative Annunziata Rees-Mogg. That's all coming up after your headlines with Theo Chikomba.
It's 1 minute past 8. I'm Theo Chikomba in the GB newsroom. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has described the strike, which reportedly killed 45 people in the southern Gazan city of Rafah, as a tragic mishap. Mr. Netanyahu says we are investigating the incident and will reach conclusions because this is our policy. He also told the Israeli parliament it was vital that Israel took every precaution possible to protect civilians caught up in the fighting for Gaza. In a separate development, Israeli forces said they were investigating reports of an exchange of fire between Israeli and Egyptian soldiers close to the crossing. The IDF said a shooting incident occurred on the Egyptian border. It's understood the incident is under review and discussions are being held with the Egyptians. The Prime Minister has defended his plan to make all 18-year-olds carry out national service, describing it as modern and bold. Rishi Sunak says the proposals will mean young people will get the skills and the opportunities they need, which will serve them well in life. He says it will make society more cohesive.
I believe this is the right thing to do because this is how we'll deliver a secure future for everyone and our country. We're not going to do that without taking bold action, and that's the type of leadership that I offer. And this modern form of national service will mean that young people get the skills and the opportunities they need, which is going to serve them very well in life. It's going to foster a culture of service, which is going to be incredibly powerful for making our society more cohesive. And in a more uncertain and dangerous world, it's going to strengthen our country's security and resilience. So for all these reasons, I think this is absolutely the right thing to do.
Meanwhile, the Labour leader has described the Conservatives' plans to reintroduce national service as desperate. Speaking after his first keynote speech of the campaign, Sir Keir Starmer dismissed the Prime Minister's proposals.
We've got desperate policies being made up on the hoof by the Tory party, and then the image of their party arguing about the policy they only announced in the last couple of days. And that, in a way, is the choice at the election, a Labour Party that is laser-focused on the issues that really matter to people and saying we're going to fight for you, and a Conservative Party that's out of road, out of ideas, driven by chaos and division, and that has a cost, a human cost.
A Tory MP has been suspended by the Conservative Party for backing Reform's UK candidate in the Telford seat she is vacating. Lucy Allen, who is standing down at the general election, said on social media she'd be supporting Alan Adams to be the town's next MP. A spokesman for the Conservative Party said Miss Allen had been suspended from the party with immediate effect. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews/alerts. Now it's back to Tom.
Thanks, Theo. Now, this unexpected election campaign has thrown one bold idea to the forefront of the nation's mind. The Tories pledged to reintroduce a form of national service. However, since the announcement, there has been much confusion over what this actually means. National service traditionally meant, according to the National Army Museum, a standardised form of peacetime conscription, which was introduced in 1947 for all able-bodied men between the ages of 18 and 21. The young men would then spend 4 years on a reserve list until this Attlee-era policy was phased out by the Conservatives in 1963. Well, today's Tory Prime Minister wants to bring it, or something like it, back. He posted a video on TikTok clarifying the terms of the policy. Let's take a listen.
No, I'm not sending everyone off to join the army. What I am doing is proposing a bold new model of national service for 18-year-olds. They'll be able to choose to spend 12 months in a full-time military commission or 1 weekend per month volunteering in roles within your local community.
Well, that's our new TikToking Prime Minister. Well, just hours after the policy announcement was made, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, said there's going to be no criminal sanction. There's going to be no one going to jail over this. So national service without necessarily joining the armed forces, mandatory volunteering, which some might describe as a contradiction in terms, and no criminal penalty for refusing to do so. However, this policy might not be hastily or as hastily thrown together as some might think. Yes, the Theresa Mayite think tank Onward wrote a report last year promoting what they called Great British National Service. It just so happens that the former director of that think tank, Onward, now works as Rishi Sunak's head of policy. Perhaps, with the recent climate, it would be beneficial to the nation to instil some national pride into the younger generations. But is this new top-down statist policy just wishful thinking on the part of Rishi Sunak? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by my panel, the former Labour MP and former member of the Royal Navy, Stephen Pound, and the former Brexit Party-turned-Conservative MEP, Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Also joining us is TikTok influencer Matthew Matos Gillingwater, who has racked up millions of views, tens of millions of views, lampooning the idea of military conscription for Generation Z. Let's take a look.
To this, I got ready for the battlefield. I didn't get to finish my bronzer though because I literally started getting shot at. Like, what? This is what I was wearing for the day. I can't believe they gave us these cargos for free because they are so cute. Luckily, the French are on our side this time, so I had to get some of the French girlies to do my French tips, and they look amazing. But anyways, we headed down to the battlefield, and me and my bestie found this swing. We had so much fun. I had to take some Instagram pictures.
Generation Z in the army. Well, would it actually play like that? Let's turn to Matthew first. Thank you for joining us here on State of the Nation. What made you make the videos?
Well, I felt like it was just such a ridiculous thing, sending Gen Z out to war. I just thought it would be a funny idea to show what it would actually be like. Also kind of playing on how old people would view Gen Z in the war. So I just thought I'd kind of make fun of the whole thing. Because
this has gone really viral on social media. People aged 18 to 24 all thinking, hang on, am I going to be conscripted? Do you think this is working in favour of the Conservatives or against them? Well, I think they've kind of given up on the younger generation. I don't think, anyone my age, I don't really know anyone that's going to vote for them. So I think it's kind of a desperate attempt to get the older people who maybe think of us as, oh, we're too woke, we're too lazy, this and that, to, get their support instead of ours, because I think they're basically done with the younger generation now. Well, Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, and of course, Generation Z, I would assume yourself as well?
General ZZZ.
Very good. Do you think that this is just a sort of age-dividing culture war from the Tories?
Well, a couple of things really worry me about this stuff. 2 days before the announcement was made, Andrew Morrison, who's a very good defence minister, actually on the floor of the House said, we have no plans whatsoever to introduce national service. This would be destructive of morale and it simply wouldn't work. That was in a reply to Mark Pritchard, another Tory MP.
In fairness, that was about...
It was 2 days. 2 days is a long time in politics.
In fairness, that was about putting every single young person to the army.
Okay.
This proposal from Rishi Sunak would put about 5% of young people in the army.
Here's the problem, and you've actually highlighted it yourself. If it's not compulsory, what is the sanction? Are we actually seriously talking about people being fined or imprisoned? You haven't got any flipping room in the prisons anyway. But here's the real problem. If you've got a group of people in the army, either they will be in a platoon or a battalion of their own, in which case, what is their job, what are they supposed to do, or they'll be integrated into the existing standing forces, in which case it'll be utterly destructive of morale. The point is that the modern armed forces are incredibly technical, and it's interesting that they talked about involvement in drones and cyber warfare.
But they've addressed that. They have
Sorry,
said...
Sergeant Rees-Mogg here wants to have a word.
No.
Sorry, Captain.
The actual figures you've quoted, it's about 5%. It's actually 1 in 28.
So why only 1 in 28 if it's such a good idea?
Because the rest of it is to make you volunteer within your own community.
But this was David Cameron's idea, didn't it, 15 years ago? Don't you remember?
That's what David
There was a voluntary scheme, but Annunziata,
Yeah.
there are lots of Conservatives who say, actually, we had conscription in this country. The Tories got rid of it. Attlee brought it in. He was a socialist. This is about the state telling people what to do. It's not very Conservative.
My father was a conscript. He had to leave university to go and be conscripted. And I think he would, if he were not dead, happily say right now that that was not a good idea. He was hopeless in terms of the army.
But a brilliant newspaper editor.
He had the
his legacy does live on,
of
though.
the rest of his family. Being a fighter wasn't his style. You can use people, I think we're more advanced now, in different ways. You can use their brains, you can use their skills, you can use TikTok, you can use any kind of electronic stuff that I will not begin to understand.
But one of the questions I'd ask...
And that would be a good idea, but bringing people together, surely, is always a good idea.
Just to bring Matthew back in for a second. Matthew, do you think that your generation generally is a bit too glued to social media, doesn't get stuck in with the community? Because a lot of this isn't just about the army, it's also about volunteering and sort of picking up litter and all the rest of it. Is there something of a community spirit that needs to be injected?
Of course, I understand that side of it, but I also think the older generations who want us to do this, they never had to do that. They never had to do community service. They never had to join the military, so I don't know why it's just our generation now suddenly.
And Annunziata, there will be many young people who think, hang on, I've done my national service, I've done 2 years doing my national service, staying indoors during COVID so that Granny didn't die.
No, that's absolutely fair. But actually, if you're double Matthew's age, as I am, you had to do at school a compulsory community service. You had to go and visit old people. You had to work in a nursery. You had to do things that brought people together of different generations. And unfortunately, I would say the woke propaganda has stopped that happening.
No, they'd want to be fighting from home, wouldn't they?
Now, they need to have DBS checks on both sides, and it's made it impossible because schools can't
Tom, can I just say one very serious thing? When we had national servicemen and women, men they were obviously, had a choice between 18 months and 2 years. 18 months was active service. Our national servicemen died in Korea, in Malaya. They were actually fighting. It wasn't just about picking up litter. It was going and being killed. So is the national service actually about a volunteer army which would actually fill the gaps in our armed forces, which are calamitous like a chasm at the present time? Is it about community service? Is it about throwing some red meat to the Tory right because they've given up on Matthew's generation and they're trying to give something to people of my generation? Well, people of my generation actually can see through this nonsense. This is a desperate last throw. And I just wonder what on earth they're going to bring up next. God help us if they start talking about capital punishment or something. There seems to be no depth to which they will not sink.
And yet, there was polling done by Onward, the think tank I mentioned in the introduction. Of course, a think tank that was born out of the 2017 Conservative manifesto and those behind it. Now, many of the people from that think tank work for Rishi Sunak, work in Number 10. They did polling on this that showed almost every age group supports this, apart from Generation Z.
I'm sorry, focus groups are the way, that's the past. I mean, focus groups are not good indicators of really where people are standing. Matthew is a person, he actually is speaking from the ground up on this one. He knows what he's talking about. You honestly can't tell me that people of Matthew's generation are going to overwhelmingly say, absolutely, I want to go in scratchy khaki uniform and, so live on a diet of worms, whatever it is they eat on Salisbury Plain and, all those dreadful things, be hazing and everything. No, I'm sorry. The armed forces themselves don't want it. I've spoken to a lot about Navy friends of mine. The last thing we want is on a Royal Navy ship, which is an incredibly difficult, expensive, technical piece of kit. The last thing you want is some unwilling person forced in there to mess around, with your 30mm.
But should we not encourage us all being part of our community? Taking part in the broader part of
do it through Scouts, do it through cadets, do it through all the organisations that exist. You don't need this.
Only 1 in 28 would be forced into the military.
But in that case, what is the point?
Let's
join the Scouts.
OK, well, let's turn to Matthew for a final word, because a lot of this election is being fought on social media. Are the Tories or the Labour Party doing more to sort of engage? Because we saw the Prime Minister post on TikTok advertising this policy. Did it go down well?
Yeah, I've also seen Labour post a TikTok kind of taking the mick out of the whole thing. But to me, I just feel like the younger generation is completely disillusioned by the Tory party. It feels like they almost don't like us. So, yeah, I don't really think they've got much chance of winning over the younger generation, especially with this kind of thing. Nobody my age wants to join the military. We just turned the age where we can go partying and we want to live our lives, be young, just like you guys did when you were that age. So why is that being stripped from us on our weekends?
Do you support votes at 16, incidentally?
No.
Now, that is interesting.
No, I think even...
Because I don't. I'm Labour and I don't.
Very quickly, because we do need to get to an ad break, but why do you think 16-year-olds wouldn't support that idea?
I know what I was like when I was 16. I know what all my friends were like when they were 16. Very small amount of people cared about politics. I feel like people will just end up doing what their parents did and will just be influenced by them. So I don't really think there's much
Interesting stuff. Well, on that note, thank you to Matthew and to my panel. Much more to come. After the break, I'll be diving into the fury sparked by Nigel Farage's comments yesterday with Trevor Phillips. But it seems there's more to this story than was first let on. You won't want to miss it. That next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GBNews' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, England fans have got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is State of the Nation at 19 minutes past 8. Now, Nigel Farage has, over the last 24 hours, faced the utmost opprobrium for his remarks yesterday about the British Muslim community, speaking in an interview with Trevor Phillips.
About Muslims here?
We are. And I'm afraid I found some of the recent surveys saying that 46% of British Muslims support Hamas, support a terrorist organisation that is prescribed in this country.
Well, Trevor Phillips said that these were incendiary remarks and went on to say this.
You talk about Muslims as hostile to British values.
No,
I've got to say, I don't really. Let me finish what I'm going to say. I don't really see how you arrive at that conclusion.
Well, this interview has been seen by millions of people, with many claiming Nigel Farage is racist because of it. But let's drill down to some of the facts, because Nigel's claims that alarming numbers of British Muslims hold beliefs that are contrary to British values are seemingly supported by some evidence. The great irony of this is that we don't need to look much further than Trevor Phillips' own research with Channel 4 from just a few years ago. Well, Trevor Phillips' own data with Channel 4 revealed that only 34% of British Muslims would inform the police if they thought somebody they knew was getting involved with people who supported terrorism in Syria. 52% did not believe that homosexuality should be legal in Britain. 23% supported the introduction of Sharia law. 32% refused to condemn those who take part in violence against those who mock the Prophet Muhammad. And 39% agreed that wives should always obey their husbands. Well, Mr. Phillips, a former chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, even went as far as to say that some British Muslims represented a nation within a nation, promoting his suspension from the Labour Party. It seems, if anything, it's Trevor Phillips and his research who at least used to take a firmer view on British Muslims than Nigel Farage does now. So how on earth have we found ourselves in a situation in which Phillips is accusing Farage of being offensive for making exactly the same type of claim that he did just a few years ago? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor. Ajmal, thank you so much for making the time for us this evening, because I think there's two different points here. Number one, the idea that all British Muslims are antithetical to British values, I think, is plainly wrong and isn't borne out by data. But the claim that a significant proportion of British Muslims do hold views that are contrary to what most people would describe as British values, well, that seems to stack up to evidence.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good evening to you and your viewers. On this glorious day, we've had a fantastic weather outside. What a discussion to have at the end of the day about our values. What defines us as unique and British? It's our acceptance of people who are different. It's about our multicultural country in which we can go to any high street and find any cuisine, any culture that we want, and we celebrate it. It's about our neighbors who are very different to us, but we embrace them. It's about our open arms to people who are in trouble around the world. It's about us standing for justice and fairness and equality across the globe. These are British values, by the way. It is about us promoting justice.
They are British values, Ajmal, but I suppose the big question is, to what extent does tolerance extend to being tolerant of intolerance? For example, 52% of British Muslims saying that homosexuality should be illegal. Should we be tolerant of that view?
Let me just finish my sentence. So if the paramount feature of Britain is about justice, fairness, and rule of law, did you know the most important feature of Islam is justice? In fact, it's more paramount to be just, to be godly. You can't be godly without being just. And that's why I've said many times before, if you do a Google search, you'll find on Sky itself, I did a TV program where I said Britain is more Islamic than most Muslim countries. Here, when I say Islamic, I mean there is rule of law, freedom, justice, acceptance, diversity, education, opportunities. These are Islamic values, and these are British values. So for anyone to suggest that British Muslims are in any way, shape, or form opposed to these sacred and universal values that are so British, I think that's really strange, because I don't recognize any of those accusations. I, for one, say to everybody, Britain is more Islamic than most Muslim countries. You name me a better Muslim country in the world. Even Saudi Arabia will not, unfortunately, will not measure when I measure the Islamic values and British values.
And yet, when you look at, for example, how many mosques operate in the United Kingdom, there are some that are funded by Iran, of course, some that take a more Wahhabist view, those that come through Saudi Arabia funding as well. There are lots of different groups within the Muslim community, and I think it's completely right to promote and highlight the number of Muslims who hold that view that you seem to espouse there, that there should be sort of tolerance and peace. But of course, there does seem to be a particular problem within Islam of a certain radicalism that doesn't exist within some other religions. Perhaps it did centuries ago, and that radicalism has sort of been reformed out of the mainstream of Christianity or Judaism. But there is a problem with radicalism within Islam.
Well, you've got to have to be fair with your assessment. How many mosques do you know? How many mosques have you visited? I have established a mosque myself only recently. We funded the mosque £6.65 million from our local congregation. Not a single penny from outside. 99% or more of the British mosques are built by the hard-earned cash, hard-earned money and wealth of British Muslims. To suggest that these have been built or funded by foreign countries in itself is not true, number one. Number two, one or two mosques that have been funded by countries such as Saudi Arabia. Well, we are in good terms with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is our friend. We buy oil from them. We sell them weapons. I don't like Saudi Arabia, but some of the British government do. So we can't have it both ways. If we're going to be buying oil from Saudi Arabia, and if we're going to be selling weapons from Saudi Arabia, surely Saudi funding should be welcomed when it comes to our mosques. Why are we having a problem with Saudi funding?
I do want to drill down in our... We don't have long left, Ajmal. Let me ask you one more question.
One more point before...
Let me ask you one more question, just to finish on. You seem to be suggesting that there isn't a problem within the British Muslim community. Is that actually what you're saying? Or do you accept that there is a particular problem of radicalism within this community?
I believe the problem in our society is universal and it transcends religion. We have, in our country, crime going through the roof. Youth are being killed. One of my friend, Imam, a Muslim cleric, was stabbed to death. He wasn't stabbed to death because he's an Imam. He just happens to be walking by the street. Now, knife crime, gang crime, drugs, education failure, NHS crumbling. These are universal problems everyone is facing. So to single out Muslim community and to say there is a problem with the Muslims is actually you're being not honest and genuine about it. And finally, look, there is a problem that you are missing. Many religious values or many people from various religions may take an extremist view, such as in America. We've got evangelical Christians or even those who call for the destruction of the Palestinians in Israel.
People would
These
think it would be
extreme, right?
A little disingenuous to deny that there is a particularly more radical problem in recent years within Islam, that there is this view of Islamism as a proportion of those that follow Islam that does seem to be more violent at the moment. If we were talking 30 or 40 years ago, we could talk about the IRA till the cows come home. But clearly, I think there is a deeper problem that perhaps we're skirting over there. But Ajmal Mansour, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I'm joined now by the chairman of the National Muslim War Memorial Trust, Mohammed Amin. And Mohammed, I struggled there a bit in that conversation with Ajmal, because I think in order for there to be more integration, we need to be open and honest about where there are problems and where there is extremism within any community.
Of course, there are extremists, unfortunately, in every single community in this country. We've had 2 MPs murdered in the last 10 years, one by an Islamist extremist, one by a far-right extremist who was obsessed with Brexit.
But you would be, I suppose, in agreement that whilst, yes, those 2 isolated MP examples sort of almost present a 50-50 sort of dynamic when it comes to far-right terrorism, Islamist terrorism, when it's actual numbers of terrorist incidents, the proportion that is Islamist far outweighs the proportion that is far-right.
We had some terrible instances of Islamist terrorism in this country from the 7th July 2005 London bombings onwards. At the same time, one of the things I'm very conscious of as somebody who reads the reports from the people who run Prevent, for example, is the number of far-right people that Prevent have also been monitoring.
This does start to seem like you're trying to sort of deflect, because I think everyone can agree that there are bad sections within any group. My proposition here, which was also the proposition of Trevor Phillips when he did that report in 2016, also Tony Blair, who wrote about this at the time as well, saying that there is a specific problem within Islam and that we need to promote the moderate voices within Islam, because too often communities are represented by people that aren't moderate and aren't mainstream.
Let me answer your point, because I don't actually go through, both sides-ism. There are problems in all communities. The problem that interests me most, and the one that I care about most, is actually extremism amongst Muslims. That's why I've been deeply involved with projects like Curriculum for Cohesion, because I want to get rid of extremism and radicalisation amongst Muslims. However, never forget that the numbers of people that we're talking about are tiny. What I object to with Farage's comments is he's latched onto a poll that I actually discussed with him in person in this studio in April. It was a poll commissioned by the Henry Jackson Society, which, frankly, I've written about it on my website. It was a poll that was structured to find the answer that it found.
We can put that poll to the side, because there have been other polls.
And for 20
the one
years,
that I'm referencing is the Trevor Phillips poll that he did with Channel 4. I don't think that had an agenda.
I read Trevor Phillips' poll at the time. For 20 years, I've seen the same kinds of polling. And in that 20 years, we've had more and more Muslims becoming lawyers in accounting, in law firms, accounting firms, more Muslims in Parliament. Geographical dispersion of Muslims, because they are less concentrated now than they used to be. What we have in this country is a great integration success story.
There is a huge success story of integration, but there are also pockets that just haven't integrated and that live almost separate lives under separate values.
Shrinking pockets. The big picture story, which I pay a lot of attention to, is one of continuing success at integration. Occasionally, it suits people like Mr. Farage to promote scare stories for his own purposes.
Well, Mohammed Aman, I hope you're right, and I hope that the direction of those pockets is shrinking. Although I do look at situations like the Batley grammar teacher,
which I criticise vociferously.
Yes, I know, and I'm not saying you're one of the pockets. I'm not saying that at all. And I think that we need to promote more voices like yours. But I do hope that your analysis is correct.
And the local authority in Batley let down the teacher, the school let down the teacher. We need a robust response from the authorities.
Well, we had Mohammed Amin there, the chairman of the National Muslim War Memorial Trust. Thank you very much for your time. Now, coming up, Sir Keir Starmer made his first keynote speech of the general election campaign today. Did you miss it? I don't blame you if you did. What can we take away from his performance? Well, we'll get to that exciting analysis next.
Keir
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So plenty of heavy showers and some outbreaks of rain are on the way over the next couple of days, but there will be some brightness in between. This is all thanks to this area of low pressure situated to the north of the UK, bringing us those heavy showers. But low pressure sits out in the west, bringing some further outbreaks of rain through the rest of Monday and into Tuesday. Plenty of heavy showers continuing into the first part of this evening, but gradually easing overnight with some clear spells developing, particularly for Scotland, northern and eastern parts of England, but down towards the southwest, outbreaks of rain pushing their way north and eastwards into the early hours of the morning, and a mild night here under all that cloud and rain, temperatures around 12 or 13 degrees. Under those clearer spells though, perhaps a little bit of a chillier start with temperatures down into the low single figures, and it does mean a bit of a brighter start here. However, across parts of Wales and southern parts of England, heavy and persistent rain slowly pushes its way north and eastwards through Tuesday morning, and for Northern Ireland as well, that persistent rain continues through much of Tuesday. For Scotland and northeastern parts of England though, a bit of a brighter start, albeit a bit of a chilly start with those temperatures in those low single figures to start, but there will be some sunshine through the morning. However, as we head through Tuesday afternoon, that area of rain continues to push its way north and eastwards as we head through the latter half of the day, again turning quite heavy across northern parts of England and southern parts of Scotland too, so turning much cloudier across Scotland in towards the afternoon. Heavy showers then breaking out across Northern Ireland, Wales and southern parts of England through Tuesday afternoon, and temperatures again around about average for the time of year, around 17 or 18 degrees in the south, but definitely feeling a little cooler under all that cloud and rain. Through Tuesday evening, the rain continues to push its way northwards, although continuing to persist for a time across parts of Scotland, and further outbreaks of rain across southern parts of England as well. There'll be plenty of showers on the way through Wednesday and Thursday, but there are some hints of something a little more settled on the way as we head through the latter half of the week.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is State of the Nation at 8:36. Ever since the Prime Minister announced on that rainy afternoon last week he would be calling a snap election, it seems the public has been waiting for the Labour Party to do something. Later that very afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer made one of the most forgettable speeches in modern history. Since then, the campaign has been launched in Kent for the Labour Party, again to little notice or acclaim. Yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer was absent from the campaign trail completely, promoting some speculation that the 61-year-old didn't have the stamina of 44-year-old Sunak. He dismissed those claims today. But this morning represented an opportunity for some substance, some soundness and some significance. During his first keynote speech, the leader of His Majesty's opposition boldly declared that that many people might find him unconvincing.
I know there are countless people who haven't decided how they'll vote in this election. They're fed up with the failure, the chaos and the division of the Tories. But they still have questions about us. I've changed this party permanently.
Well, perhaps I'm being a little harsh. Sir Keir spoke to great lengths about his changing of the Labour Party, his humble upbringing, his parents, his love of the countryside and of cows, as well as the need for economic stability that serves the interests of the working people of Britain. And this idea of the working class remains a running theme throughout his leadership, but he himself has in the past struggled to define exactly what that means.
Define working class.
No, working class is families that
work for their living. I mean, this has been a story.
Don't middle classes have that?
Yeah, of course they do. Of course they do.
Don't quite understand his definition, but maybe we can be helped out now by the Labour MP for Brighton Kempton, Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Lloyd, I suppose it's sort of fun to poke fun at what is a relatively strong and stable, perhaps dull as ditchwater campaign. But after all, I suppose, if you're 20 points ahead in the polls, perhaps you don't want to say all that much.
Well, I don't think you have given a fair analysis at all. I mean, Sunak disappeared from the campaign and then reappeared after making this bonkers proposal around national service. They cut $1 billion from youth services and then they want to put it back in compulsory youth services. It seems mad to me. And what Labour outlined is 6 key pledges that we're going to push forward in our first few days of government so people get an idea of what we're actually going to do. It's going to be a mission-led leadership, and Keir outlined those things. And he outlined the things saying how he is a socialist, but that should not scare people, because socialism is about making sure that the country is the very best it can be for working people. So I think actually some real good substance there. And, as you know, I'm not always just a cheerleader for the leader.
I know you're not. You're an independent-minded member of Parliament, but
they all say
those 6 first steps. I mean, the first one is economic stability. That's not a detailed plan. That's just saying we're going to keep things very stable. I mean, is that really what we need to hear right now?
Well, I think it is, after we've had such a disastrous response from the Conservative government and instability so far. The first one is about an underlying golden thread that will run through all of our policies. So if you look at our green energy policy, that we will ensure that we have homegrown energy, that we own the assets of it, that it isn't owned by someone that can pull the strings. That is about economic stability in people's homes, so we don't have those awful inflationary pressures that are coming down the road this winter. Let me be very clear, this winter, prices for home heating and electricity is due to go up more than it is even now. I know we've got a price dip now, but the markets are very clear. And only Labour has a plan to make sure that we are no longer at the whims of the international market and at the whims of Putin turning on and off the oil.
How is your plan going to make us no longer at the whims of the international market? You want to stop any exploration, any new exploration in the North Sea. And when it comes to your Great British Energy proposal, it seems that it's not all that different from the government's Great British Nuclear policy, which is going to fund new nuclear power stations.
I mean, the nuclear policy is good, but from the Conservatives, but of course it is about 10, 15 years too late. If you remember, when we left office, we had plans for 4 new nuclear power stations and the Conservative Liberal government shelved them, and we are now playing catch-up. But our view is nuclear isn't the only option. It can't be the only option. No one thinks it can be. Seriously, we need a mix of providers. We need renewables. We need wind, of which the government has been lacking on. No one bid for the last round.
The government hasn't been lacking on. I'm sorry, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, the UK is the largest offshore provider of wind in the world. People refer to the United Kingdom as the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind.
Yes, but in the last round for offshore wind, no one applied because the economic framework that Britain is offering them is poor. And that's why that economic stability line needs to run throughout, because we might have made great progress now, but it is a race. And if we do not win that race, because we've taken our foot off the pedal at the last moment, there will be no good. And so Labour wants to make...
Just finally, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, because we're running out of time, can a knight of the realm, the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition, be working class?
Well, I think working class in this country, as we know, is complicated. It is about culture as well as about wealth. But I think what is very clear is that Keir started off working class and he worked his way up. And that's what those opportunities we want for all.
Well, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, thank you very much for joining us. As ever, really appreciate your company here on State of the Nation. Well, with me now is my panel, former Labour MP Stephen Pound and Head of Communications at the Popular Conservatives, Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Annunziata, what did you make of that?
If I ever had to listen to a monotone, I would just watch that speech on repeat. It was platitudes. It was words of repetition. It was without any form of emotion. It was quite surreal on how dull it was.
But isn't that what he's sort of trying to do. It's how Biden won in 2020. It's how the Australian election.
It's how John Major won.
Sometimes, perhaps.
How Clement Attlee won.
He doesn't want to say much at all.
Theresa May won?
Yes.
It was, I am a responsible pair of hands. And I'm sorry, what our country needs right now is a little bit of life. We need to be invigorated. We need to be injected with enthusiasm for how wonderful our country genuinely is. And if you look at what he actually said, there was nothing there.
Stephen Pound, is this an issue? As Annunziata raises, Theresa May became Prime Minister by default. All of her opponents spectacularly took themselves out. And it sort of feels like that's happening right now with Keir Starmer. The SNP is taking itself out. The Tory party is tearing chunks out of itself. The Lib Dems are nowhere to be seen. Keir Starmer is sort of winning by default.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what's it? Napoleon said he'd much rather have lucky generals than good generals, and so to a certain extent he's been lucky. But look, I have to say, I really don't want to be too predictable, but I was listening to that speech today, and I thought it was damn good. I thought it was invigorating, and I thought it actually did have a vision for the country. Absolutely genuinely. I mean, trust me, I used to be a politician. But look, he a couple of times he did say, honestly, and I say this honestly, and it did strike me the sincerity there.
Anyone buy honestly from any politician?
Hang on. One of the important things he said, he was actually talking about rural crime, about the problems that we concentrate on what happens in the cities. He was talking about the problems that people face in the country. He's talking about his football team that he used to play for and his family that were down in Worthing. I found that absolutely extraordinary. In a certain extent, do you remember when Douglas Hogg stood for the leadership of the Tories? What's his name? The Home Secretary Douglas Hurd. Who denied he went to Eton. He just said he went to a school in Buckinghamshire or somewhere near Slough. You know, the business about being prolier than thou is an illness that afflicts politicians. I don't think Keir Starmer's got... Keir Starmer may not define working class. As somebody who is upper, lower, middle class myself, I think working class means it's where you start, not where you are. And as we used to say, rise with your class, not above it.
Of course, I think he had the benefit of going to a grammar school, which sadly not many students have the opportunity to go to anymore. But much more to come, of course. We'll be over to the United States in a second. A tale of a certain prince and a certain visa row. What will it mean for the Duke of Sussex's American dream? That next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, you're a respected royal biographer, and there are so many people who are on the sort of royal gravy train, if you will, people who are making a career out of gossip and speculation. But yours very much built on confidence and sources and fact. And you don't offer an opinion that often inside your book. But when you do, I suppose, therefore, it carries a bit more weight. So when you say that the Sussexes are easily offended and, you know, effectively pretty prickly, what do you mean and what have you based that on?
Well, on numerous... their riposte to any given situation in their books, in their TV interviews. And let's not forget, there have been a lot of TV interviews, 6-part Netflix drama, Spare. You see time and again that they feel that they feel resentful. They feel that, you know, something hasn't gone their way and that this is part of some sort of calculated campaign against them. And actually, I mean, when you've got a fast-moving story... I mean, for example, in my book, I go into those frantic hours after the death of the Queen, and everybody's trying to sort themselves out. And Harry writes in his book Spare how you know, no one will return his calls and he can't get through to anyone. And it's sort of... It's just all a bit me. And actually, the whole kind of royal machine, if you like, is a team effort. And I just think it's very sad because, you know, Harry and Meghan, they had such potential. And now when we do tend to hear from them, on a royal matter, it's just to say how miserable they were being royal. And that was, you know, they were royal for whatever it was, 600-700 days. They're post-royal now for over twice that time. Can you envisage a scenario where they're back in England and they're back in royal life? I can't envisage a situation where they're back, as it were, as part of the sort of royal working unit, but I could certainly see it becoming a kind of normal thing for them to keep.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers. I agree. And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This is State of the Nation at 8:48. Now, it's the story that just won't go away as far as Prince Harry's concerned. Did the Duke tell American authorities about the drug use documented in his autobiography when he made his visa application to the country? That question formed the basis for the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation's application for the visa records of the Prince to be made public. But there's been a new development. Lawyers for the Department of Homeland Security have claimed that releasing a document relating to the Duke of Sussex's visa application would be a breach of his privacy. John Bardo, the lawyer representing the department, reportedly added that there's a stigma associated with being mentioned in a law enforcement record. Well, can we buy that? What does it mean for the Prince's American dream? Well, joined back with my panel now, and Annunciata, it's a bit of a tricky one for the Prince. I mean, either he lied on his application to have a visa in the United States, or he lied in his book.
I mean, I would have thought the obvious thing for him to do would be to clarify that all of this would go away if Prince Harry said, this is what I said, and this is what I've done. The fact he hasn't, worryingly, implies to me that perhaps he didn't tell the truth on either one or the other of those two things.
There is a third option, Stephen Pound, which is that the administration in the United States, the presidency or whatever lowly bureaucrat actually involved with this, that they turned a blind eye to it.
Well, look, I mean, there's two aspects here. Maybe he did, have a little bit of the old jazz cabbage when he was at school, and he mentioned this in his book, but that hasn't stopped Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, a number of people getting visas to go to the United States. I think what this is to do with whether he actually lied on his visa application form. And that is the Department of Homeland Security, most of them are capable of reading, or at least having books read to them, and I'm sure they can read his book. And if he said on the one hand he did, and on his visa said he didn't, end of story. There's no
if
discussion.
He's judged by the same standards as anyone else would be, then that's fine. But if it were any of us, they would take anything we said as gospel and worth investigating.
Not if we wrote a book.
Is there a double standard here, though? And it's not just a royal double standard.
No.
Is there a rich and famous double standard? I mean, all of the Beatles, as you rightly mentioned, they wrote songs about LSD, and then they went and lived in the United States. Ozzy Osbourne, David Bowie, Elton John, Robbie Williams, all admitted to job-taking, all lived in the United States for a period. Is there a double standard if you're a rock star?
Under American law, you are not banned from having residency just because you have ever taken drugs. You are banned if you lie about taking drugs. Now, the question here is, did he tell the truth on his visa application that he had taken drugs and they took that into account and they accepted it and he is still allowed in? Or did he say, I never have?
Well,
and then write a book saying, I've taken lots of drugs.
Can I just say something? As somebody, I've applied for visas in the past, and they do. One of the questions is, are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? All that sort of stuff. But they don't say, have you ever taken drugs? They say, have you ever had a criminal conviction? Have you ever had a caution? Have you ever been in any way?
No, the Americans don't.
There's nothing in it which says, have you ever had a spliff?
I think there is in this specific American. Is it the green card specifically?
Oh, for a green card, that's for presidents. Yeah. For permanent residence.
which
But we're
he's
talking about a
got.
visa, not permanent residence.
Which he's got.
Yeah.
Well, I believe Prince Harry does have a permanent residence.
Yeah.
He lives in California.
Isn't that through his wife? She may be Nigerian,
No,
but...
you still have to fill it out for yourself. So,
And this is why the case has been brought. But, of course, we're hearing from the Department of Homeland Security that they're just saying that this would be a breach of privacy. Do we buy that?
I think the really big point here that's very relevant to British people is that we need to keep the judiciary and politics completely separate.
Unlike America.
In America, they are totally blurred.
But
So
they're
you've got
elected.
Trump coming out on one side saying, I will never let him come in if he's given a hint of lying. You've got the ambassador for Biden on the other side saying Biden will never ban him. We want, I think most countries should have, a totally independent judiciary.
But hang on a second, hasn't he breached his own privacy? Look, we're talking about the breach of privacy. When he wrote that book, he breached his own privacy 6 ways to Christmas. Come on. It's got to be a bit of sensibility.
Well, that is the argument. I'm afraid we have run to the end of the discussion and the end of the show. But Annunziata Rees-Mogg and Stephen
let's
Pound,
give it
very
another
much for
hour.
joining us. We've got Patrick Christie's up next. And Patrick, what's on your programme?
So the revolutionary communists are standing at this election. I have got one of them on versus somebody who has survived communism and fled it. So that should be an interesting debate. Labour can't be bothered to justify votes for 16-year-olds anymore. Rishi Sunak is auditioning to play up front for Southampton. Is it Islamophobic to state facts? And find out the latest mess Angela Rayner's got herself into.
Well, sounds marvellous. We'll be sticking to every word of it. Patrick Christie's up next. This has been State of the Nation with me, Tom Harwood, and I'll see you tomorrow.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to our latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So there's been plenty of showers around for many of us today, and there's further rain expected over the next couple of days, all thanks to low pressure situated out towards the west of the UK, slowly moving its way towards us over the next couple of days, bringing some heavy rain and some blustery showers. Any showers that we have seen across eastern parts of Scotland and northern England will gradually ease as we head through the rest of this evening, leaving some clear spells overnight here, but down towards the southwest, a very different picture. Plenty of cloud around and some outbreaks of heavy rain moving in. Temperatures here around 12 or 13 degrees, but definitely a little chillier under those clearer skies, and quite a bright start for parts of Scotland and northern England through Tuesday morning. However, down towards the southwest, it'll be a much greyer and damper picture to start on Tuesday. Those temperatures are starting the day around 13 or 14 degrees, and heavy and persistent rain continuing through much of Tuesday morning, particularly across Northern Ireland and parts of Wales. As I mentioned, a bit of a brighter start across parts of Scotland, albeit a chilly start in places. However, there will be some sunshine as we head through Tuesday morning. But in towards the afternoon, that area of rain continues to push its way northwards, eventually reaching into parts of northern England and Scotland later too. Behind that area of rain, plenty of showers across Northern Ireland, Wales and into southern and central parts of England too. Again, with some hail and thunder mixed in, so some heavy downpours likely. Another warm day, temperatures around 17 or 18 degrees, so around about average for the time of year, although perhaps just a little cooler under that cloud and rain further north. Wednesday does start a little brighter for most of us, plenty of sunny spells through the morning, but quite quickly as we head towards the afternoon there'll be plenty of showers developing. Again, these heaviest across eastern parts of England and Scotland, and there could be some hail and thunder mixed in. Further showers as well on Thursday, but there are some hints of high pressure returning towards the end of the week and in towards the weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not lying, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's. Tonight,
we're talking about Muslims here. We are.
Was Nigel Farage absolutely spot on or downright offensive about the British Muslim community? Plus,
it's not what we do, I doubt it. We've got the energy, we'll tell you all about it. I searched for my spark and I found it.
Rishi Sunak is forced to defend his national service plan.
First thing, no, I'm not sending everyone off to join the army.
But Labour don't seem to want to justify lowering the voting age to 16. How many 16-year-olds pay proper tax in this country?
Why are you so worked up about it?
Angela Rayner's absolutely copped it.
If me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it.
And Rishi Sunak is